Well, good afternoon. I'm going to talk really loud so that people outside understand that we're here. Okay, I've heard of the graveyard post-lunch slot, but this is taking the piss. Okay. So, as early humans, we'd have evolved with soil on our feet, avoiding feces. We'd have been barefooted, and our feet would be populated by soil. We'd have lived in a house that would have looked something like this, with soil floors and soil walls. So the bacteria in the air we'd have been breathing would have been soil bacteria. We'd have been farming. The toilet would have been at the end of the garden, and our water would have probably been either from a running stream or a well. So again, the bacteria in that water would have been soil bacteria. Our kids would have been brought up surrounded by soil. That's very different to how they're brought up today. Our food is washed, and we can be accused of over-cleaning with biocides. What that leaves us with is a biofilm. Anybody heard of the word biofilm in the audience? Oh, yeah. Okay, there's quite a few. When I usually ask that question, everybody looks at me blank, but they've still got plaque on their teeth. So plaque is a biofilm where fecal bacteria in your mouth takes sugars from the food you consume, a mineral from your teeth to make that horrible white slime that we remove daily. So we can't use chlorinated water to get rid of plaque. We can't really use a mouthwash, an alcohol-based mouthwash. We've got to physically brush that slime away. Our kids are brought up where the bathroom, the toilet's in the same room as that moist toothbrush, okay? We might as well use the bog brush to brush our teeth from a bacterial point of view. So how do we reintroduce soil into our modern lives to protect us? That's typically what we live in now. If I brought muddy boots into that, my wife would go bonkers. Even the dog is washed. Okay, so if we wanted to live sterile, that's how we'd have to clothe ourselves. Even our washing machine is full of biofilm that infects our clothes. So we get things like athlete's foot, acne, dermatitis or eczema, thrush, I know that's not bacterial, viral cold sores, smelly feet. These are all, fairly modern ailments. We get pneumonia, we get the common cold, and we get allergies to pathogens. These are dust mites that live in our clothes, in our bed linen. Either their feces or themselves, we get allergic to those, and then we get sinus issues. And what do? We take antibiotics. So how do we, in a modern house, populate with soil instead of fecal bacteria? This is one way we do this. We've got a plug-in there that sprays soil bacteria into the environment of the house. Here's a handheld, it is. Can I go back? Yeah, that's a handheld device that's spraying soil bacteria onto hands. That's for acne or for eczema, repopulating the skin with different bacteria. Here, we're spraying. Try it again. Here we're spraying a pillow with soil bacteria with the objective of getting that bacteria to take out the moisture. If you take out the moisture, the dust mites can't live, so people don't wake up with sinus issues. So we're at the ethical dairy, and we're looking at ethical farming. I don't think this is ethical. That looks fairly standard. That's a carving pen. But really, you might as well carve that calf in that sort of environment. Both of those have got fairly toxic, pathogenic bacteria in that environment. It looks clean because we've got straw, but basically it's shit. So this is what I typically see in a dairy farm. This is a biofilm in the water trough. I don't know if you can see this, but that's a red slime. It looks like the inside of a villi of a cow. It's red because what the bacteria is using is iron from the water. The food comes from the animal's mouth. You might as well give them that water to drink because bacteriology-wise, it's the same bugs. Okay? I don't think it's really ethical to have bacterial infections of the feet and walk them through a footpath with formalin stinging that bloody thing off. So what we do as a company, I started the company having done a field scholarship. We go on farm and we take swabs and we find where in the animal's environment they're faced with bacterial biofilms that can make them unhealthy. That guy was doing the same as this guy. He was spraying soil bacteria into the shed. We're out competing shit bacteria and we're making a nice environment for those animals so that they don't get sick. So on the left, we've got really wet litter in a chicken shed. On the right, we've dried that up through bacterial respiration. Okay? So 16,000 birds in that shed, but that's a real nice dry litter because we're using bacteria to take out moisture, same as on that pillow. So here we're dosing some water with soil bacteria. This guy was too tight to buy a pump, so he's using a jug, right? But basically what we're doing is we're getting rid of that toxic biofilm from inside the water pipes and the water troughs. So what the animals are drinking is water with soil bacteria in it, which is what they'd been drinking when they were evolving, drinking out of a ditch. Today, that ditch might be full of somebody else's slurry. Okay, so this is the sort of, it is. Try again. So this is the sort of water we can give our animals. I think is it ethical, regardless of system, to give an animal good, clean water. There's still food debris, there's still mineral in the water, but there isn't any toxic biofilm full of E. coli or Streps or Pseudomonas or worse. Okay, that's a form. Guess what's in that form? Soil bacteria. That's the same as if they were walking out in that field getting soil on their feet. So bacteriology-wise, we can get a dry bed, clean water, good air for animals in a housed environment. Now, animals, as we've seen today, tend to tell us what they need. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There is a concept in industrial baking, which some of you may have heard of, known as the Chorleywood bread process, which is based around the concept of a no-time dough. You're the first witnesses of the no-time presentation, because that's all I've been left. I'm taking my cue from John Ruskin, who's 200 years ago was born this time of year 200 years ago, John Ruskin, who said lots of wise things, including the one quoted at the bottom there, cherish always local associations and hereditary skills, slightly flowery way of saying it's really important that we adapt the way that we react to things, whether they be art, science, or life in general, by understanding things that are appropriate to their place and learning from the communities and the consortia of wisdom that are represented by the passing on of knowledge from one generation to another, which is how we accumulate the depth of knowledge that we currently have at our disposal if we choose to use it. Now, a quick run through my history, just for those who don't know. I started the village bakery in Cumbria in the 1970s as an escape from London and an attempt to find out how one should live ethically, I suppose you might say. Expanded in 1991 with a very large wood-fired oven to bake about 500 loaves at a time, and started making a lot of sourdough bread for Waitrose, pulled by customers saying, why can I eat this bread but I can't eat shop bread anymore, which led to research and ultimately my doing a master's in food policy and writing the book Bread Matters, which was an attempt to poke the bread industry in the eye and make people more aware of just what goes into their daily bread, not just the additives or the processing aids, so-called, but the production methods, which have shortened this process and left out the vital process of fermentation, which we now understand involves interactions of fungi and bacteria, which are crucial to digestive health and many other benefits. Moving to Scotland in 2010, I started with my late wife an agroforestry project in the borders, growing cereals in strips between tree crops in order to try and understand more about the potential advantages of cereals which had been bred in a system before the Green Revolution distorted everything for headline productivity and large corporation profit. And we ran courses there as part of various community engagement activities, as well as purely to try and teach well-heeled people how to make better bread. And you can see the cereal trials there in 2012, soil to slice, which we developed with something called sourdough exchanges, where people would come and do a bit of work on the land and then learn about the different cereals. And in 2014, I was asked to write a book which made sourdough simpler, or rather enabled people who thought it would take a lot of their life up with something that worked so slowly to understand that actually that was easier to fit into a busy life than a fast-rising dough. And then in 2016, we formed a community benefit society with charitable status to bring this together with the notion that there is a problem in Scotland which we really urgently need to deal with, and it might be that older heritage or evolutionary varieties and the best of modern research can be put together to find some solutions. And the little picture in the bottom there of 2018 is a people's plant breeding exercise that we did last autumn at the Botanics in Edinburgh, which is an attempt to reconcile, to insert some democracy into plant breeding. In other words, to get ordinary people to contribute what they would like and what they appreciate about cereals into the choice from within a diverse cereal population, in order to try and make sure that we don't simply leave the breeding criteria and to some extent the dubious methods of rapid hybridization to the people in white coats or those who pay them. So what is the problem? Well, you can see from the figures there that it's a pretty big one in Scotland, because Scotland essentially grows a lot of grain which it doesn't use directly for human consumption at all. And it certainly, we've been told repeatedly, even most recently in a funding application which was turned down, it's well known that you can't grow bread wheat north of the Tees. This is the official view, and a reason for not funding organizations like us who want a little bit of research to show, well, we actually can, because I've got some flour from wheat grown in Fife, which I'll show you at the back there afterwards if you're interested. But the consequences of Scotland abandoning any attempt to become self-sufficient or remain self-sufficient in its bread grains for many, many years is that we have, like many other societies, a concentrated problem with diet-related ill health. And what we're trying to do is to show that this could be reversed. That's the timeline of our current activities, and we've now got grain in the ground which will produce somewhere between 50 and 100 tons of wheat for this harvest, and we're gradually expanding, crucially trying to keep the growth of production in line with demand, because as soon as we allow those things to get out of kilter, we become prey to the possibility that those people who profit from inequalities in the food system will dive in and say, I'll take that grain off you, or I'm going to dive in and actually produce something that looks a little bit like what you're doing and charge a little bit more than I can get for my commodity grains with none of the values or the ethics intact. So we research the grains and their genealogy, but also what they actually have in them. Some of you may be aware that the British grain system is currently dominated by something called the recommended list. and that has a line along it separating out the varieties that farmers can choose from for bread making from those for animal feeds, and nutrition is only mentioned below the line, in other words, for animal feed. It's never mentioned for human consumption. Surely a food system which is way out of line. And we engage in some community bakery training and citizen science work, such as the one I indicated before. You can't read that. That's the results of some of our original research showing that, on average, our varieties have got higher minerals than conventional controls. That's an example of some of the community engagement we do, soil to slice with people as little as 3 or 4 at a nursery. And the picture at the bottom left of community gardens in the arse end of Edinburgh. Granton people won't like me to say that, but you know what I mean, and it's meant respectfully, because there's nothing wrong with arse ends. Sorry, I'm going down a hole there, which I certainly don't intend to do. No pun intended. And sorry, it's all. I'm going too fast for my own good. The point is that picture is rather a lovely one of community gardeners carrying home sheaves of grain, which they will then thresh out and make into bread, and discover all the multiple meanings that can result from doing it differently in that way, and sharing a loaf of bread that you actually have had some participation in around the table. So I would echo 100% all the things that Al had said about the importance of soil bacteria, and just observe that many of the microorganisms in sourdough, which we deploy for that fermentation system known as sourdough baking, are sympathetic with, sometimes actually mirroring the importance and the sort of co-determination or co-evolution of human beings with those consortia of bacteria. And I was saying to somebody earlier in the audience, my neighbor, who I was invited to say hello to, that I don't know how we got onto this so quickly, but my children are always aware that if I haven't said the word fermentation before breakfast, it's a strange day. But I was pointing out that DNA analysis of sourdough lactic acid bacteria shows quite a lot of overlap of sequences with rodent urine, and any cereal farmer will know exactly how that comes about. But how interesting that something that we think of as rather repulsive is actually happily working away there to our benefit, because those bacterial sequences are certainly not pathogenic in that form. And you can see a list of all the potential benefits. I could have actually filled 3 or 4 slides with all the recent research into the importance of sourdough lactic acid fermentation. So no-time dough is the enemy number 1, really. And anything that is sold cheaply in a supermarket, or a loaf tanning salon, which is our name in the Real Bread campaign for in-store bakeries, given that they just put well, it's true, isn't it? They bring it all in. It's already been baked once. It just needs to give it a little bit of a tan. And it has about the same effect on beauty in bread as it does on human beings. It's a bit shocking in some ways. And the importance of sourdough being made properly is indicated by the wholesale co-option of the term sourdough, which doesn't have any regulatory defense at the moment, despite our best intentions. Just shows how easy it is for good ideas to be taken over if you don't address power imbalances in the system. And if there's one thing that I think is important, is that we work our way through to the underlying politics here, so that we don't simply end up by telling other people that they should eat differently or better, but we actually empower their... Have I run out of time? Okay. Cultivating diversity is the most important thing. If there's one theme about all this, it is that diversity in soils, crops, stomachs, society, and everything else is the golden thread, which we've broken completely in our cropping systems, which are highly undiverse and monoclonal. So we've got to rebuild that diversity. But to do so realistically, we need to get to scale by reinventing systems of relationships between communities of producers and consumers, or citizens as they're better called, so that we can reward farmers for the number of people they nourish in the full sense of the word, rather than the number of tons of product they produce. And that way citizens can engage with people who they can trust to be trying gradually to improve everything that they do rather than simply selling them the lowest cost product. And to end with another quote from John Ruskin, that's what I believe. Thank you.
The sourdough bread you had at lunch was made by Earth's Crust, who are in the room in Castle Douglas, and it was flour from Andrew.
I'm Will Winter, holistic veterinarian. Holistic means that we try to find the cause behind the cause behind the cause for a disease. So if you have TB in your herd, we don't really respect the Louis Pasteur theory, germ theory. It frequently goes back to a nutritional deficiency. So that makes me the antichrist of my profession. Is Catherine still here? The other veterinarian in the room? Okay. Good. So, like everybody else, we've condensed, most of us never speak. Can you still hear me if I move around? Can you hear? Not as good?
Just project.
He's going to turn it up. The slides I'm going to show are going to go by so quickly you'll probably get vertigo. Because I want to get to the last slides I brought. I think that's the good news. This is one of those good news, bad news presentations, but we'll get to the good news. How many of you have had raw milk before? So few of you, no mother? Okay. And how many of you think that it might be possibly dangerous? I mean, I do. It's possibly dangerous. How many of you never raise your hand when you're asked? Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. Boy, these are very dim. This is part of my bag, baby. You can't even really read that at all. Well, anyway, it used to be, we always tell people that Jesus drank raw milk because pasteurization is so new. So this is what people have come to believe now, that milk is a deadly poison, and there are some milk that is bad. And this is the answer to basically what I'm saying. This is Dr. Ron Schmidt. It's called The Untold Story of Milk, and it tells how we got started pasteurizing milk. Louis Pasteur, did anybody know what he used to pasteurize before milk? It was wine, and he was French. So I just say there's milk and then there's milk. Some milk is horrible. If you drank raw milk from a commercial dairy, it would kill you. It's that bad. This is an epidemiology report. This is part of the bad news. The results of this study, they found some outbreaks with raw milk. And like I say, there's not going to be a quiz, so you don't have to memorize all this stuff. But these are the deadly pathogens that have been found in raw milk. And you can see it's United States, UK, Canada, Ireland, Salmonella being the #1. There's a type of Salmonella that's resistant to all antibiotics. Campylobacter jejuni is another deadly pathogen. E. coli, there's E. coli 0157H7, which is it's a Shiga toxin producer that kills you. Yersinia, which is also the plague germ, causes the plague, and Listeria. So this is the issues, and people do pasteurize milk at home. It can be done for about $200. You could get a little pasteurizer. So there are people really that are anti-milk, not just vegans and vegetarians. Can you see through me okay? That's amazing. And then, of course, how do you milk a soybean? And in the United States, they're talking about making it illegal to call almond juice or soybean juice milk. The milk is really just something from a mammal. And I agree with that. So this is the good news. Consumer Reports nailed it on the head. They're not always right. This is a magazine that tells you what kind of car to buy, what kind of shoes to wear. But it says the quality of a number of dairy products in the study was a little short of deplorable. Pasteurization is an excuse for the sale of dirty milk. And that's exactly what it is. As long as you have standards, nobody's is rewarded to go too far below the standards, so they're gonna stay just below the standards. So confinement rearing is a dirty practice. I call it a disaster waiting to happen. So these are somatic cell count numbers, and somatic cell count is white blood cells that's in your milk. So what's another name for white blood cells? Pus, exactly. So many people that look like everybody in this room say, oh, I'm lactose intolerant. Nobody in this room is lactose intolerant. There are some Africans, there are some Native Americans, Aborigines. Those people never grew up with milk, so they don't have a tolerance for that. But we all do. But what people are reacting to is cooked pus. And in my country, GMO grain that gets in there, and. So there are also particle size differences. At the top curve are the particle sizes of milk. And you don't have to know all the details, but when we store milk, those particles come apart. Storage is, shelf life is related to two things, somatic cell count and temperature. So if it's not real cold and if you have a high somatic cell count, it starts to go sideways. This is about raw milk cheese, and this is the quality of taste. And you can see with raw milk, that's the kind of tan color. The flavor potential for raw milk is very high, but people in some places like pasteurized milk because it broadens the window of how long you can do it, but you lose a lot. This just shows the process of pasteurization. In Fahrenheit, it's 160 degrees for 30 minutes. This is how milk is homogenized. The rats put it in their mouths, chew it up a little bit, and then spit it back into the tank. Well, in some countries. Actually, homogenization causes more allergies than just about anything else because it breaks down the fat particles and it breaks down the little casein protein particles, and you get things that look like burrs. Under the microscope, they just look like a cockle burr. And these things are allergy particles causing people to react badly. This symbol looks pretty natural, doesn't it? It's a great symbol of irradiated milk. And irradiated milk is one of the most ungodly things, literally ungodly, using this. So what they did is people said, oh, I don't want any radiation in my milk. They go, oh, don't worry, it's just cold pasteurization. So it's really a neat little euphemism for these guys. And that's what the machine looks like. It's setting over a bomb, basically a hydrogen bomb, and there are protests. Same is true of lab-cloned milk. This is actually a summary that you can't read by Agnes van der Plas, who's he has a raw food store in LA. But it talks about the health factor. So now this is the end, kind of the beginning of the end here, what I wanted to show you. I'm going to show you 12 reasons why you do not want to drink pasteurized milk. And this is one. All of the enzymes are destroyed with heat. And enzymes do what? They digest. They break down your food for you over and over and over. One enzyme, they're the hardest little working particles you ever saw because they just keep facilitating digestion. So it's destroyed. There are also enzymes and products that are antibacterial. Lactoperoxidase and lactoferrin are actually used in almost all meat plants. This is a milk product that's sprayed on the meat to keep it from rotting or going bad. In the old days, like it says here, the Arabs and the Icelandic people would store their meat in milk to keep it from going bad. So those things are destroyed in pasteurization. And you can't read this. These are diseases that have occurred with pasteurized milk. And in the detail, there's a lot of fatalities. In the United States in 1945, there were 9 deaths in Kansas from pasteurized milk. How could that happen? So here's the deal. Raw milk, even though it gets a bad rep, has the lowest incidence of pathology of any product. And almost all the people that got sick were drinking pasteurized milk that was contaminated after it was pasteurized. Because after you pasteurize milk, you've just basically got a petri dish that germs can grow in. There's nothing to protect them. Pasteurized milk, these are factual. This is science. This is not anything we made up. This comes out of government organizations and centers of higher learning. Pasteurized milk has caused 2,185 times more foodborne illness than that attributed to raw. And one of the largest dairies, Altadena in California, has served millions of people. They've served, we figure, 3 billion glasses of milk. And not one person got sick, and it was all raw. Okay, yeah, we're getting there. Until 1950, the pathogen level was high, the bacterial count was high, and people actually there were no epidemics even back then. So the theory is you could drink 6,500,000 more quarts of raw milk than pasteurized without getting sick. So it's a false security. It has built-in safeguards. Mark McAfee in California has challenged raw milk with deadly pathogens. 30 minutes later, they're gone. You can't find them. So allergies, immunity, it's really that pasteurized milk is the root of all food allergies. 70% of our immune system is in our gut. Because it has to filter out almost a ton of food a year. In my case, probably more than a ton.
Last slide. Go.
Okay. Okay, I'll just stop there. How's that?
That's fine.
Okay, good.
Another chance later.
Okay, very good. Yes. Nick Bernard has samples of raw milk, if anybody wants to taste some really good milk. This is milk from England. It's not from where we are now. It's sold legally. We bought it legally. It's been nicely chilled. And I think you'll find it tastes like a vanilla milkshake. And after you've had this pasteurized milk, taste cooked. Have you ever been to a conference where you got served raw milk before?
Not in Scotland.
Where is the milk from?
Yeah.
Hello, folks. My name is Martien Lankester. I'm a little bit the odd man out since I happened to be on a holiday here with my good friend Charlie. He said there is this wonderful conference going on, and within half a day I was invited to give a very short presentation. Very interesting presentations all along. I'm going to talk a little bit about the true costs of food. We heard this morning, we saw the report of the Sustainable Food Trust on the hidden costs of food. What we did in the Netherlands, just a brief introduction, I'm of origin a medical doctor and also an organic farmer. I combined the two already 40 years ago, being an organic farmer and having my medical practice at the same time, and have been working on promoting healthy food and organic farming systems since then in many countries. What we recently did was for the northern region of the Netherlands, an assessment, a study, scenario study, what would happen if all these 3 provinces would be 100% organic? What would change in the economic performance? What would change in the environment and in the health costs? It was quite interesting what came out. So the question was, what will happen to, for instance, the employment? What will happen to the economic performance and the environmental performance, including the health costs? We had 2 benchmark indicators. One was employment, which is quite easy, but then the other one was the real added value, and that one was more interesting to work on. We said that we invented 3 virtual money systems, all related to the euro, which we called the Futuro, the Maturo, and the Puro. The Futuro is the future costs that you will encounter, for instance, through environmental problems. The Maturo is the societal costs. And when you subtract these 2 from the gross value of the agriculture sector, then you get to what we call the pure value. We had 9 scenarios, 20, 50, or 100% organic, with a either 0, 10, or 25% premium price, and all mixed together. So a baseline scenario, and 9 other ones. And just to tell you how we did this, my colleague, who was the leader of this study, did his PhD with Professor Jules Pretty of, I think it's called West Sussex University. Some of you maybe know him. He has been doing a lot of work in this field. And we used the methodology set up by the European Environmental Agency. So we got these 10 scenarios, and we saw that in a number of scenarios, the gross added value would be bigger than in the baseline scenario, and obviously those would be the ones if you combine organic 100% with a higher premium price, with a 25% premium price. But now the more interesting part is, what is the effect on the environment? I show you a few slides. It's too short time to go into it. Where the blue lines indicate what the future scenarios perform compared to the baseline scenario. The baseline scenario is the outside line, 100%, and a number of environmental effects are very clear. For instance, on the right side, you see the sulfur dioxide that decreases to almost 0. Other indicators decrease a little bit or more. And here you see the synthetic pesticides on the left upper side. They go down to 0, and others are equal or a bit or more or less. And that all of that can be monetized. There is an interesting system to calculate how much money it will cost to work out, to counter these environmental effects. And here we see these costs included in the picture we saw before. And you see that with in the middle, you see the baseline scenario, that the environmental effects cost 800 million euros compared to the gross economic value of 1,000 million euro. So it's about 70% of the value of the agri sector is lost by the economic costs. In the organic scenarios, of course, there is still environmental costs, but those environmental costs are less. So what you need at the moment is approximately a 10 to 12% premium price for the organic products to reach the same economic value of the agriculture sector if you would turn the whole region towards 100% organic. And that is very interesting. Since I'll skip these conclusions, but I'll just go to the elephants in the room. If we would manage in future to also monetize a number of other interesting aspects, one is biodiversity, which at the moment it's very difficult to monetize, but people are working on that. Another one is the resistance to antibiotics, which came up several times already today. And then certainly also the internal food quality that we have been hearing a lot about today. If you will be able in future to monetize those as well, then the scale will easily go in the other direction, and organic farming will lead to a higher economic performance in a region like we have been working on. I think we did a number of recommendations to our government, and in the north of the Netherlands, we are now going to work more proactively to promote organic farming. And I just would like to say, as from my own experience, having worked in more than 30 countries with large and small farmers, and being a medical doctor myself, I always say that the real sustainable farmer is the doctor of the future who will heal the earth. And we need that person, and we have to put him on a pedestal, and we have to put her on a pedestal, because 70% of the world's farmers are women. Thank you very much.